Where Loyalties Lie, Chapter 3. Aftershock. White walls of pure cloud stretched down an endless corridor. They were smoothed, hoof-buffed, and made from the thinnest of cirrus strips threaded together. The doorways set into both sides of the hall, at uniform distant steps apart, screened with wealth and class. Above each door was a number, and beside each door a name, set in fine wood, carefully mounted on the surrounding cloud. A mare walked this endless hall, scanning the numbers above the door, specific to each room she knew very well. She passed by the countless rooms, ignoring the warm comfort of air and the pleasant lighting, until she finally stopped up before her destination. Room 4244D was indistinguishable from its neighbors, externally. Beside the door, on a plaque, filigreed letters proudly proclaimed that the room's occupant was one Rainbow Dash. The mare smiled and glanced back quickly at herself. Her wings were perfectly pruned, her pure white mane pulled back into a short, neat ponytail, and of course, her cyan coat was brushed low and smooth, without the tufts of stress and sickness that had been present when she last met Rainbow Dash. The door opened with the slightest push, sliding fully open without hitting the wall on the other side. Inside, the room was just as plain and perfectly white as the hallway. Rather than doors, it contained a plush cloud bed, a plain cherry nightstand, and most importantly, a pony. She was sitting quietly, staring out the nearest window nearest the bed. The soft pitter-patter of raindrops masked the hoofsteps of the approaching mare, while an expanding ring of rainbow light spread through the distant sky, countless miles away. The mare walked forward slowly, smiling as she observed the radiant rainbow mane that decorated the bed's occupant. She looked so wild and yet so peaceful standing there. Rainbow Dash only looked away from the sky when she felt pressure behind her, on the right side of the bed. When she turned, she nearly started crying. Mom? Easy Breeze smiled and put her hoof around the neck of her not-so-little daughter.
Rainbow, I'm so proud of you.
What is this place?
Does it matter?
Breeze ran a hoof through her daughter's unruly mane.
You're here now.
Then came the affectionate nuzzle that Rainbow had missed in her youth.
You've grown up so much since I last saw you. You were so little then. I could hold you in one leg. I bet you don't want to sit there reminiscing, right? Not when we could be flying.
No sooner were the words out of Easy Breeze's mouth than she shot off through the room's one and only door. Rainbow rose to her hooves, confused and alone. She felt perfect, devoid of the numbness and fatigue of waking. Her hooves settled onto the clouds gently, and she began to slowly walk toward the door. On the other side were clouds. Perfect, puffy, cumulus clouds over an endless stretch of sapphire blue water, clear and deep as the eyes could see. The air was warm with tropical heat, but a smooth breeze felt the temperature invigorating instead of draining. It didn't exactly match the weather out the windows on the other side of the room. Rainbow took a tentative step through the door and then twisted her head to look behind it. There was nothing there, no walls or structure to which it attached. It stood on its cloud alone, just as Rainbow felt. She might have stood there for minutes, pondering, were it not for the sharp and welcome voice behind her.
Let's race, Rainbow!
The younger of the pair had to run forward to catch up with her mother. Once her wings were spread, it took Rainbow no time at all to clear the distance. The two Pegasi flew in wide arcs, rolling, diving, and crisscrossing in midair before the mother said something about speed and shot off into the blue. Rainbow struggled to keep up. It shouldn't have been so hard. She could outrun the Wonderbolts. Her mother hadn't been known for her speed all those years ago, and that was before she got sick. Memories came flying back. Cloudsdale General, a dark room with a shut door. Outside, Papa was talking to a doctor that I didn't recognize. They were using big, complicated words. Encephalitis, affairs, morgue. I didn't like the way they sounded. When I tried to push through to see Mom, Papa scooped me up with one strong leg and held me tight. Not today, my only sunshine. It made me sad, though I didn't understand why. Rainbow followed after her, her questions growing with each passing moment. Far below, the ocean gave way to beaches, and then grassy plains and rolling hills. The sun never seemed to have moved from its place just below the crown of the sky. Always, Easy Breeze lays at the edge of her vision, just above the horizon, flying away, never growing closer or farther. Rainbow couldn't catch her, as hard as he tried. Finally she stopped, not out of fatigue, but desperation. She ought to have caught up by then. Below, she saw a cluster of trees. If she wasn't mistaken, they were peaches. She slipped down and found a comfortable branch before reaching out to the nearest fruit. The tender treat came away from its stem, and only the tiniest tug found its way into her mouth with no greater struggle. It was succulent, sweet, and perfectly ripe. No real fruit was that good.
Something wrong?
Rainbow almost fell out of the tree. There was her mother, not looking a day older than the last time she had seen her. 14 years earlier in that hospital. And considerably more healthy. Rainbow struggled to gather her thoughts. How are you here?
What do you mean? I'm always in your heart, Rainbow. Just like I told you.
Rainbow's face creased, trying to process the thought. You're
Don't, the mayor whispered, pressed a hoof against Das's lips. You don't need to worry about that now, Rainbow. It's all in the past. For you and I both.
The words felt wrong, but Rainbow decided not to push them. She was already in enough confusion, so instead she turned to another, stranger topic. What about Dad? Is he here? She shook her head.
No, I wouldn't talk to him if he were. Not after what he did to us.
Then her soft but perpetual smile returned.
What are we talking about this for anyway? We could be flying. I thought you were supposed to be fast.
Rainbow knew that all the unanswered questions should have been bothering her, but they didn't. Was it the air? The fresh open atmosphere? Or perhaps the thought she was seeing the mother she lost so long ago? When Easy Breeze took off, faster than she had any right flying, Rainbow didn't follow. She instead lingered in her tree, enjoying her solitude while pondering the world around her. When she was half done with the fruit, her stomach protested. She was full. She found that odd, since she had not been hungry when she began to eat it. Regardless, she threw the half-eaten fruit over her shoulder and waited for the satisfying splat. Daz looked down when the sound didn't come. Below her, the grass was gone. Instead, extending to immeasurable depths, she could only see darkness. The peach fell, unhindered through the vacuum. Slowly, the darkness began to greedily consume the tree. Rainbow jumped into the air, hoping to fly away from the expanding dark. Her plan lasted until her wings were meant to spread. No warm wind fell through her feathers. In the place of that perfect sensation, her stomach lurched in protest as she began to fall. It was the worst feeling for Dash to fall. She always hated it her entire life, as the sign that her one special gift had failed her. Every time, without exception, it ended in pain. That was the easy part, though. Physical pain. The fear of the fall was what scared her the most. That fall was her worst nightmare made manifest. It was falling without end. Most ponies would be worried about the unknown landing. Dash would have welcomed the momentary pain. Instead, she saw nothing. No ground below, no painful crack, just falling on forever, on, and into darkness. Rainbow looked desperately, trying to find her wings freed of whatever was holding them. What she saw instead was the greatest of terrors. In the place of wings, her body bore a pair of nubs. Clean cuts left only tiny drops of blood on her side and mane. The wounds were too familiar, far too haunting. A softness pressed against Rainbow's face in the fell chill of the darkness. She turned back to look below, and saw the shadowed blonde feathers. There were hundreds, floating free, that slid past her face and her body with gentle tickling motions as she continued to plummet. The feeling was unearthly, grisly, and left Dash with none of the comfort that was a warm wing that might have given. As she fell, more and more feathers pressed against her, until they were less of a cloud and more of a choking mass. She couldn't see, and all she felt were their teasing touches. She screamed, and her voice was the only noise in the void. Then it stopped. First the falling, then the feathers, and finally the noise. Something under Rainbow's toes was hard. Was it stone or steel or something else? Everything was still dark. In the distance, there was a bright light, and then came pain. Rainbow shot upright, and almost immediately collapsed against her pillows from the very real pain of the motion. Sweat clung to her fur, matted down her mane against her face, obscuring her from her surroundings. Thick and heavy layers of fabric weighed her down against an incredibly plush mattress. It was warm. The sun was shining onto her exposed neck and head somewhere from the left. Her wings, just as well as the rest of her body, twitched idly, begging for exercise. She breathed a sigh of relief when she felt them, present and accounted for. Her next action was to twist her right foreleg up to her hair, sweep it out of her eyes. Some instinct told her that the limb should have hurt, or lay useless at her side, yet it heeded her will without explanation. When the rainbow mane was swept away, Dash was finally able to fully take in her surroundings. She lay on an opulent four-post bed of enormous size, spread with blankets and pillows of golden purple. Apart from the bulges that marked her legs less than halfway down its length, the mare could see two other places where the fabric had been disturbed. One was a huge area of roughly circular twisting, as though something large had been set down. The other was a space with two small groupings of water droplets, a few inches apart. The room beyond the bed was opulent and airy space, spread haphazardly with cushions and plates of half-finished food. The walls played host to bookshelves, as well as cases for numerous works of finely finished art. Directly across from the bed was an oil painting, almost twice as tall as Dash herself, depicting Celestia and Luna standing side by side, smiling. The faded tones of paint and the peeling of the widest strokes told far more of the image than its actual subject. Few works of art were old enough to have captured such a serene first hoof. The top of the painting's heavy wooden frame was obscured by a few strands of ivy hanging down from somewhere unseen high overhead. Dash leaned forward, trying to get a view of the source of the plants, and in doing so, caught a glance at something else entirely. Perched on the very end of the thickest leaf of ivy, there rested a flower. It must have been a lily or a lotus or something similar, similarly made of solid gold. In that tiny flower, Rainbow's memories came flooding back to her. Her meeting with Twilight and the princess in the very same room. Her first encounter with the would-be commander. The plot, the confrontation, and the fall. The Pegasus slowly began moving her hooves across her body, checking for scars or marking. All she could note, instead, was a sharp but quickly fading pain that accompanied her movements. It was a welcome surprise, but it still felt wrong. She shouldn't have walked away from that crash. She was lucky to be alive, but anything less than a fractured skull, wing, and ribs would have seemed like fiction. Then her mind shifted to Luna and the assassin. Masquerade, she had said. What had happened after the sonic rain boom? There was another quick glance around the room, gave no answers to the obvious question. But it did reveal an incredibly opulent veggie burger resting on a solid gold plate to Rainbow's side on the nightstand. She gave it a cursory glance and smiled. Double pickles, no onions, and an extra thick helping of ketchup. Whoever ever arranged the plate knew Rainbow well. It was exactly how she ordered her favorite meal, even if it wasn't usually served quite so gourmet. There wasn't any sense of letting it go to waste, especially given the growling in her stomach. She wolfed down the burger as quickly as she usually flew, lacking only the shattering of a sound barrier to set a new record for Equestria's fastest flyer. Sonic burger booms sounded dumb anyway. The next step was to get back to what she had been looking for moments before. Answers. There obviously weren't any to be found in the empty room. At least, for some pony without Twilight Sparkle's impressive deductive skills. Instead, she rolled, or rather flipped, though she would never admit it, out of bed. After extricating herself from the complicated mess of blankets that had coiled around her midsection, she stepped toward the door of the room. It was a soft, curious noise. Yet, for the way Dash had put it in the air, it might as well have been a bolt of air and lightning. The Pegasus relaxed slightly when he saw the noise's source.
A phoenix? What are you doing here? You must be Princess Celestia's pet. What did Twilight say your name was? Villa something. Philomaric! That's it! She wanted me to hear you sing. Can you believe that? I mean, not that you would sound bad, Philomaric, but...
The majestic bird crow came to us disgruntled warbling.
Yeah, I wouldn't call myself that either. How about Phil?
The Phoenix saw her in an awkward glance.
I know it's still not that cool, but I gotta work with what I got. I mean, Philomaric, what's up with that?
Right, you too.
Anyways, I gotta try to find the princess. Catch you later!
Rainbow left the Phoenix behind and threw over Celestia's doors. Without so much glancing forward, she darted out into the royal palace's hallway. Things were much the same as they had been the day before, save the surprising lack of servants and guards ponies. The hallway to the left and backward to the commander's quarters. Rainbow didn't even consider heading that way. She had seen enough of that room to last her a lifetime. Instead, she turned to the other path and took to wing. Her speed carried her through the closed double doors at the far end of the hall. And for her trouble, she found her nose smashed up against some pony's chest. Rainbow collapsed to a sitting position, and in the awkward silence that followed, the only motion was the swinging of the door that behind her as it slowly shut. The mare standing over Rainbow was not some pony she had expected to meet. A mare who could narrowly beat Big Magatos in the big competition. She had an off-white coat, an eggshell mane pulled back into a tight ponytail, and an icy demeanor.
Rainbow Dash, we were not expecting you to be awake so soon.
Though it was subtle, Rainbow didn't miss the hints of a Sally accent.
The princess wants you. Follow me.
Without waiting for an answer, the towering mare began walking off. On foot, Dash struggled to keep up with her massive stride without running. After a few moments, she took to the air, hovering beside the guide and trying to ignore the sudden twinges of pain accompanying each of her beats.
Who are you?
Soldier on.
Rainbow waited a good 10 seconds before it became perfectly clear that the name was all she was going to get. Soldier R didn't even glance over to check Rainbow was still following.
Okay, well, it's nice to meet you.
I'm Rainbow Dash, fastest flyer in Equestria and future Wondervault.
Bearer of loyalty.
Huh?
Rainbow checked her head for a moment before realizing what she meant.
Oh yeah, that too, but that's more of a special occasion thing, you know.
It's more important.
If you say so. Anyways, what do you do?
I am acting captain of Celestia's honor guard.
You're the commander? I thought he was a stallion.
The question earned Rainbow the satisfaction of seeing the massive pony's face change just for a moment. Unfortunately for her, it was the negative. Her lips twinged downward, as if bringing up the subject that the black-armored pony had hurt her.
Acting captain. Real commander is missing. Likely dead.
Nothing had a hope of quietly smothering their conversation as quickly as the blunt acknowledgement of the grim truth. They continued on their way, accompanied only by the noise of On's footsteps and Rainbow's wingspeeds. The palace wound around Rainbow, but its stained glass and towering ceiling seemed less welcome with the subdued sense of urgency she felt. They kept walking and walking, until finally Rainbow couldn't take it any longer. How's Princess Luna?
Alive.
Soldier On answered bluntly.
For now. You to see.
Unfortunately, seeing Dash required to wait through the rest of the winding halls and surrounding corridors along their path. Nevertheless, patience did eventually win through for the young Pegasus, as a pair of rather bland wooden doors were pushed open by the leading guard's pony. Inside, Dash found a room that she would have expected to find in Ponyville or Clydesdale, but certainly not the coriest halls of Canterlot's most decorated feature. Sterile white tile walls and linoleum floor left the enormous palace looking like, at first glance, a bathroom. Within dozens of blue curtains hung in clamps against the walls, failing to conceal anything of note. The stainless steel fixtures attaching them to the ceiling made it obvious they were meant to conceal the half-dozen cheap plastic-lined beds, and evenly set along the walls. The smell of antiseptic and talking pills filled the stale, barely circulated air. At the far end of the room, one blue curtain was drawn shut, concealing inaudible murmurs of some quiet conversation, as well as a piercing, rhythmic beeping, which followed the rhythm of a heartbeat. Waiting for no acknowledgement or patience, Soldier marched across the room, steel-shod hooves clicking sharply with each step, and in time with the pulses. Whether he consciously timed her steps or not, the noise led to a grim percussion, with two potent taps of hooves on linoleum escaping into the air with each beat. It seemed to take an eternity, during the noise, before they finally reached behind the curtain. Rather than draw it open, Soldier stood up to her full height, drawing her legs together in perfect posture. Only when at fully attention did she speak.
Rainbow Dash, Your Majesty.
The curtain was flung open with a burst of gold magic. The force tore apart the blue fabric, leaving it hanging off kilter from the wall. Inside the space, Rainbow counted 4 ponies. The first was Shining Armor, who wore the entirety of his gem-laden armor and stood stiffly by the bedside. When the curtains moved, his eyes widened slightly, and his jaw hit the door just as far. He obviously intended the question only for himself. The words that escaped his lips were inaudible to all present.
How are you?
The second was a much smaller stallion in a white coat of a doctor, standing next to a shining by a white metal machine near the wall, the source of the beeping. Rainbow recognized it as a heart monitor, though the various other readouts that held his attention meant nothing to the Pegasus. Beside the beeping machine, laid sprawled out on the bed, was Luna. Neither her tiara nor her ornate betrayal were present, leaving her with much more of approachable appearance. Her decidedly mundane blue hair was spread every which way, eerily plain while she could have been surrounded by a starry window into the void. She was breathing softly, but her eyes were closed. With her legs and torso concealed, Rainbow didn't tell any more about her condition, or the source of the wound which had incapacitated her. Beside the princess there was another mare, sitting with her head on the blanket beside Luna's feet. She was tall, certainly, but her long thin legs looked much more of the model than a warrior. Her mane, a soft and welcome pink that reminded Dash of Fluttershy's, hung loosely down her back. In places it was ruffled and twisted, and clearly not been combed in any recent time. Her wings, folded idly against her side, bore off-kilter feathers and obvious kinks. They were sort of marks that showed either an incredibly stressful flight or personal care over an incredibly long period of time. Given the circumstances, Des automatically guessed the former. Meanwhile, her horn bore a burnt tip, though Rainbow didn't have the magical experience to appreciate what that might mean. It took Daz a double take to realize that this mare was an alicorn. She lacked the potent size that marked Celestia and Luna, as well as the cosmic qualities of their manes. But the horn and wings were there. When he spoke, the surprise only grew larger. The mare turned to Rainbow, and eyed her with a look that melded panic and desperation.
Tell us everything.
It was Celestia's voice. Princess, what happened? You looked... I am fine! Celestia snapped. Rainbow couldn't help but draw back in alarm at the sound of the princess's anger. It only took the reaction for her to lose the bladed edge that occupied both her voice and expression.
I am sorry. I have spent a great deal of magic. I am fine, despite my appearance. I promise.
It wasn't enough to really convince Rainbow, but the obvious stress of her voice was enough to get her to play along. That's good. How's she doing? The question finally got the doctor to look away from his charts and acknowledge the presence of the other ponies, other than his patient. He was a younger stallion, for a doctor, with a bone-thin face, who looked as though he hadn't slept in days, nor shaved in weeks.
She's alive, thanks to you. Her fall resulted in 3 cracked ribs and even further bruising on her right side. Externally, she should be fine, but she's been comatose for about unknown cause since she was brought in. We're running tests now to see why.
No pony said anything for a long while. The doctor just stood there, looking from one face to another, clearly wishing there was something he could do, or at least somewhere else he could be, At last, Soldier On spoke up.
You should go, Dr. Accessibilus.
With that, the tired-looking stallion marched out of the room, pausing only to restore the turned curtain to a halfway closed position. Once again, the group was left in silence. Once again, it was the grim-faced Stalagarian Titan who took the initiative to speak up.
Miss Dash, tell us what you saw. It started when you flew off from the group.
Okay, so... Masquerade panted, not from stress or necessity, but from the sheer exhilaration of risking it all. Of course, no pony was going to catch her. No pony even had a distant chance of stopping her. She slid the warehouse door shut behind her and stalked into it in the dark, with a smile on the face she was wearing. It was a unicorn stallion, though. She had to look down her nose to remember the colors. Puce? Why she had chosen that? She shrugged off the robe of magic that enveloped her, and swept down the rows upon rows of unmarked boxes with an abnormal grace and silent footsteps. She couldn't help but spin, giddy as a school filly. She'd done it! The impossible! She had taken down a goddess by herself. No one else could claim that. No pony, no elk, no griffin, no nothing. Her work was perfect. Finally, her horn burst with magic to ignite a pair of torches as her last twirl ended. Sitting in front of her was a cage, and inside that cage was a stallion. A gray old stallion, probably 40, 50-something, covered in scars and silent, simmering rage. He had been the biggest block to her pan, and it took nearly a year of work to get him out of the picture. Yet there he was, lying in his cage, his chin laid upon his forehooves like an old dog waiting on the porch for its master. He didn't even bother looking up to acknowledge her.
Oh, sorry about the wait, Captain. I know it's been a few days, but I just got so busy up in Canterlot playing with the guards' ponies.
The old stallion didn't respond at all.
Aren't you going to ask me how it went? Don't you want to know?
He still just lay there.
Oh, you're being a spoil sport, Captain. You're just afraid to hear it, is that it? Too scared to hear the truth?
She leaned up to the edge of the cage.
Princess Luna's dead. I got her.
Luna?
He asked, in the same gruff tones she had used so carefully a few days prior.
Why, of course. Don't you think I'd go after Celestia, do you? She doesn't deserve to die. No, just Nightmare Moon. Gone from the world. At the hoof of a mere mortal mare. Maybe they'll build me a statue. Do you think I look good? Or maybe marble would be better.
She leaned up, putting her nose a few inches through the bars of the cage.
I imagine it must feel horrible, knowing that you failed. I'm sorry about that.
He was drugged, of course. She didn't expect much of a response. The hugging Lindsay swipe from his right forehoof, therefore, counted as incredibly surprising. She pulled back in time to avoid having her head caught against the bars at his mercy, but she didn't get away unharmed. A bleeding gas leaked down the end of her muzzle, ruining her otherwise pristine coat. It stung, terribly, but the sheer glee of flowing through her dispensed with the disappointment quickly.
You know, I get to decide what happens to you, right? I think you'd be a far bit more kind.
He responded by putting his head down again and closing his eyes. She thought of him like an old wolf. He was certainly beyond his best days, but the slow, resigned quality that dominated his emotions and actions concealed a dangerous speed and an incredible ferocity that would snap out at the first sign of vulnerability. That was why she had to keep him drugged. It wasn't a question of if he would escape, but when. He was losing weight, clearly, and his wings were moldy, but he hadn't taken the time or effort to clean them. She'd been drugging his water and food, but when he stopped eating, she would start injecting the whisper salt straight into his flank. His resistance to that stuff was admirable. She had already gone twice to what the drug dealer, going solo, had recommended for the daily limit. But see, he was still up and roaring. Her magic pulled 3 tiny white rocks from a bag and placed them in a glass of water. There, they were stirred into the dissolution and then poured into a syringe. At last, the eye lifted to the air at the whim of her magic, and began floating through the bars of the cage.
You might as well not try to fight this, she whispered. You'll know I'll win anyway.
To her surprise, he didn't. The syringe slid sharply into his flank, just above the cutie mark of his steel shield, flanked by bolts of metal lightning. Either he didn't notice the pain of the syringe, or he didn't care. As the super drugs entered his veins, he didn't bother moving. Masquerade found his response to be no fun at all.
Oh, come, Captain. You used to always fight this bit. Are you finally giving up?
She smiled.
Here, I thought you were the sort who kept fighting forever.
He still just lay there, unmoving. She could see his nostrils flaring, even beneath the scars at the end of his muzzle, but otherwise he seemed dead. There was only one solution. She walked slowly to the other side of his cage and picked up a long metal stick, a fire poker she found by the fireplace at a hotel suite in Philadelphia. She clutched it in her mouth.
Magic just didn't have the same results.
And pointed it straight at his back right flank, where he should have had his other cutie mark. Instead, he bore a massive fleshy burn. His other minor cuts and scrapes marked him as a soldier and a stallion who wasn't afraid to fight. On a younger stallion, she thought, this would have been a real turn-on. This scar could never be considered attractive. Its raw flesh extended from just beneath his right wing all the way back to his flank, and part way down his leg. Masquerade could only guess at its origin, but she knew it was painful. It had also been what revealed her disguise to Rainbow Dash, the ever-famous bearer of loyalty. That cunning little filly had been the one hole in her plan. But it didn't matter anymore. Still, the thought of getting caught by some pony so untrained angered her. So, naturally, she decided to take out her fury on the one subject she still had. When the poker met the burn, the Pegasus screamed in agony, so loud that the cage bars rattled and Masquerade feared she would be caught by some pony outside the warehouse. Of course, that was before she remembered the enchantments she had put down to mask all that noise from the structure and to draw attention away from it. He added no words to his soulful scream, and in fact didn't even bother to slide to the other side of the cage. She had to admire his resilience. In that light, she dropped the poker just outside his reach and walked back to the front cage. Again, he chose not to acknowledge her. Too bad. She still felt like tormenting him, just in a different way.
You want to know the worst part? None of the guards' ponies figured it out. Not the gatekeepers. Not your precious honor guard. Not even shining armor.
Who did?
He asked. Whether it was a lucky guess, a stab at her pride, or something else entirely, she didn't know. She was just happy that she had gotten to ask a question.
Rainbow Dash. What are the elements of harmony?
Rainbow?
The commander's eyes grew very wide for a short moment. Then with a sigh, his head began to slip back to his hooves. He gave in to the pain and fatigue and the chemicals sleeping through his blood. Sleep overtook him gracefully, leaving only a smile on his face. When Rainbow's story was finished, it became entirely clear that no meaningful questions had been answered. Knowing Masquerade's name didn't give the guards' ponies anywhere to work with, or anywhere to go. Celestia, who had remained silent as the captains asked their questions, finally mustered the will to step away from her sister.
Thank you, Rainbow.
It was just an explanation, Rainbow muttered back. Shining Armor had to cover his mouth with a hoof, and even Celestia cracked a slight grin. Only Soldiers On seemed to be unaffected by the sudden spree of mirth. Nevertheless, every pony felt the room warm with several degrees as the icy shade of danger was held back, even just for a moment, by the humor of Rainbow Dash's misunderstanding.
You saved my sister's life, Rainbow,
Celestia clarified. Oh yeah, well, it was nothing. Celestia was about to offer a kindly reproach when Soldier On spoke up.
Your Majesty, we don't have time for this.
Celestia stared back. I have every intention of thanking Rainbow properly for her bravery. Shining stepped up to the honor guard's side to offer his support. His face again went cold, and the room fell with it.
With respect, Princess. Lieutenant On is right. Equestria needs you now.
My sister needs me now, Captain Armor. I am not leaving her alone. Armor frowned, building up the courage to contradict the princess. The press is clamoring at the palace gates, Your Majesty. The stable of nobles is demanding a council. We need you. And Luna is dying, Armor!
Celestia snapped. A few more tears fell from her already wet muzzle.
What would you expect me to do? Would you leave Twilight's side?
Unicorn winced a low blow, though it didn't stand up long to the force of reason.
Nothing is going to happen to her,
Shining Armor protested.
You expect me to believe that?
Celestia's pitch cracked before she forced a hoof to her eyes to clear herself up. She looked embarrassed, raw, and emotional, and in every other way the opposite of the distant, perfect ideal that she usually appeared. I could stay here, Das offered in her quietest voice. It stopped all the noise, save the steady beating of Luna's heart. For now, I mean, Princess. If you need to go, I'll stay with Luna. No pony actually acknowledged Rainbow's offer. Their silent concord was enough that one by one they had already left. First went Shining Armor, who offered Rainbow a hoof on her shoulder just for a moment as he passed. Then Celestia left, prodded along by Soldier On. The princess offered a final glance back to her sister, and a desperate, silent plea to Rainbow. Shining Armor led the princess and his new honor guard counterpart out of the infirmary and down the halls to the second nearest private space. He felt that using Luna's quarters would be in poor taste for the distasteful business that needed to be discussed. It was time to do the part of his job he truly hated. It was time to make hard decisions. He had liked being a lieutenant, where the hard calls were somebody else's problems, and all he had to do was be really good at catching the bad guy. Perhaps he liked that part of the job so much because he was the best. When he thought on it, though, it was also the easy part. The decisions were so much more dangerous than the criminals. At that moment, he felt sorry for Celestia. The room in question was a recently refurbished dining room, still devoid of the distracting decoration. Ancient paintings, sculptures older than any other living pony, and other novelties that dominated the rest of the palace. Instead, it held a thick, polished ebony table, surrounded by ornately carved chairs of the same dear black wood. Holding the door open, he allowed Celestia and Soldier On to enter first. Celestia didn't sit so much as collapsed into the chair nearest the door. At the foot of the elongated table, he and Soldier On took up the flanking seats and waited for the others to speak up first. Shining Armor knew next to nothing about Soldier On, as was the case with the most mysterious and intimidating honor guard. Given recent events, he wasn't about to put much trust in her. Perhaps it was the fatigue, or the painful tug of his duty, but he quickly carved down to his own sense of obligation and spoke up.
Princess, Equestria is falling apart. Everybody saw Miss Das' sonic rainbow. It blew out some of the stained glass in the windows all the way back here. I didn't want to put out a statement without talking to you first, but, well, they want answers. The press is basically printing rumors at this point.
Shining levitated a rolled bundle of papers from the pocket in his armor and tossed them in front of Celestia. They were the front page headlines of the biggest papers of Equestria, hailing from Canterlot, Cloudsdale, and even as far as Stalingrad.
Nightmare Moon returns! Rest in peace, Rainbow Das, hero of Equestria. Assassination plot, royal blunder, princess falls drunk from balcony. There's a sale down at Penny's!
Celestia took a deep breath. Tell them... What do we tell them?
That's the least of the problems. Soldier On responded coldly. The stable of nobles is convening over this. We can let the royal guard deal with the masses.
I'm not leaving Canterlot for a trip to Trottingham, Celestia snapped. Not now.
Soldier On shook her head. They're coming here, your majesty. So are Lady Valdria and Emperor Magnus.
Shining Armor couldn't help but betray surprise.
The Griffin Emperor?
And Lady who? Ruler of the Elk, Celestia explained vacantly. They're coming to see just how weak Equestria is. They want to play the oldest game with me while my sister is dying. She took a long, slow breath and turned back to Soldier. And I'll have to tell them a civilian saved her. Celestia shook her head. Where's the rest of the honor guard?
Red flag is on Graver's border. She ought to be back to Baltimore soon. Reckoning is in Sabrika, and Image is dealing with the necromancers on the Galapagos Islands. We have a few leads, but none are promising. Even if we had them all here, he would still be 2 gods short, with Star and the commander gone.
Celestia hesitated for a moment, as if in lost wistful thought, before turning to Shining Armor. He had spent the entire night writing messages, dispersing troops, and throwing all around the force he could bring to bear for what he had feared was the greatest challenge he would ever face. The stress had ground his axis into his mind firmly. He outlined, from memory, just how he allocated all the regional forces and scouts that were scouring the Equestrian countryside, and exactly what they were looking for. In the end, though, what he didn't say was what Celestia really came to understand. If Masquerade had been able to replace the commander and sneak into the palace undetected, there was no way that a normal guards pony would have any chance of catching her. He concluded with the hard truth. The fact is, Princess, we've been scaling back the guards since the Dragon Wars. With Twilight and her friends to handle Discord and similar problems, I can understand why. But now we're short-hoofed.
What do you propose I do about it?
Celestia asked. Shining Armor shrugged. I can increase recruitment, but we don't have time for training if we're expecting to catch Masquerade. Soldier On offered an icy glance.
Appease the nobles. If we could call upon the domain guards ponies, we'd be able to find Masquerade and make it a present on the Griffins and Elk.
What do the nobles actually want?
Celestia asked.
They see a power vacuum forming. Some of them might be able to consider to console you, but most are here because they want to take up Luna's position if—
Absolutely not! Celestia slammed a hoof on the table, splintering the wood and shaking the room's chairs.
I won't hear them talking about this, hovering like vultures and hoping behind my back that Luna dies.
On gave a cold nod, though her expression betrayed no sense of empathy for the haggard alicorn.
Your Majesty, I will do everything I can. I'm sure Captain Alma's forces are as well, but you need to face the possibility that we may not be able to save Princess Luna.
They were strong words, Shining Armor knew instinctively. Soldier On was brave to have uttered them, but he was about to pay the price. Celestia stood up. Her eyes began to glow a portent white. Worse though was her voice. Much like the now infamous World Canterlot pronunciation, Celestia's words were accompanied by an unmistakable echo. However, they were not shouted, but instead plainly as fact.
Perhaps you do not understand, Lieutenant. Let me make this perfectly clear. Equestria will go to war before I see my sister! Take it from me!
Shining Armor flinched back at the impressive display. He heard from older guards pony that Tartarus had no fury like Celestia's, but he hadn't the imagination to comprehend her angry. So far gone was she from her usual tone. It made the stiff posture with which Soldier On stood up to her all the braver. When the arcane force surrounding the princess began to fade, the honor guard spoke up.
You might go to war, but Equestria won't. Not for her.
Shining Armor was shocked almost beyond words. What are you saying? She ignored him completely. What went through Celestia's mind, he could not comprehend. Soldier On simply got up, knowing that she was no longer welcome, and walked to the doors. Only halfway through them did her Stalingradi accent break again with an uncharacteristic and unexpected tone of anger.
I know something about the revolutions, Your Majesty. You walk on thin ice.
With that, she let the door swing shut. Celestia stared at the door, silently controlling her rage. Shining watched her face slowly lose its creases. Then, all at once, she collapsed back into her chair. The fatigue that plagued her body was no more obvious than in that moment. She sat, resigned to the fact that there was perhaps nothing she could do to help her sister. What was that all about? Shining Armor asked timidly.
The honor guard has never left Luna.
Her eyes flitted away, deep in thought. Shining knew there was more to the story, but he said nothing on the topic. Instead, he waited until the mighty and heartbroken ruler denied to speak again.
What should I do?
She asked, weakly, barely holding on to hope that some answer might be offered. Where was he expected to go for direction, which he didn't know what to do? Shining Armor simply shrugged, trying as best he could to look meek. He knew what he had to say, and unlike Soldier On, he was utterly terrified to say it. I haven't lived 1,000 years, Princess. I only know how to be a guard's pony, really. There are plenty of others like me, and all of us are looking after Princess Luna. But right now, Equestria needs a princess, and there's only one of you. Yeah, it's a shame that this fic wasn't made after Twilight's coronation. We'd be in the money! Celestia nodded and then stood up slowly.
I think I have a plan. Tell Captain On I want to apologize when you see her.
Sunny's brow rose with curiosity. The princess's face returned to the plain and passive state it always bore, fixed and unchanging like a mask over countless years of her life.
Her words may have been wrong, but she was right, as are you. I have to think about Equestria. Do what you can for Luna. Please.
Are you going to the nobles?
I have to do one last thing for her first, Captain.
Rainbow sat there, watching Luna breathe in and out slowly. It was sad, the filly thought, that the respect had finally gained in every pony's eyes had been taken away so swiftly. All of the things Luna had gone through over that one mistake. Why couldn't ponies just forgive her? It seemed like the simplest thing in the world. The heartbeat monitor kept a slow, soft, but above all, steady tempo. The noise was the only thing really keeping Das company. She hated just sitting, waiting for nothing at all to happen, so she started talking.
Hey, Princess?
It's Rainbow DS. You know, the fastest flyer? Rainbow stopped, getting a new appreciation for the sound of her own words.
I sound really stupid when I say that, don't I?
Maybe it's like that other guard's pony said. Rainbow Dash, bear of loyalty. To her ears, the title didn't sound much better.
Anyway, I just want to say, I'm sorry. This shouldn't have happened. You did great out there. Every pony loved you.
And when the doctors get you fixed up, you've got to do it again. The sky thing, I didn't really get to watch. I was a little busy. But I want to get a chance to see it. So, will you? Naturally, the princess didn't answer. She just laid there, but slowly breathing, her heart beating steadily. Rainbow's ears perked up when the second noise joined the heart beating. The clicking of hooves on the knowing approached her, but without the perfect timing or the piercing weight of soldiers on steps. Rather than keeping Luna's tempo, they trod on the beats, but in an unsteady pattern that brought to mind fatigue. Dash pulled herself up by the side of the bed, and then pulled back the curtain. There was Celestia, still pink-maned and tired. Mortal. That was a good word. The contrast the way she normally looked. Like she had to eat, sleep, eat, and worry. In a way that she never seemed to care about when she towered over other ponies, with her radiant, tricolored mane and brilliant aurora.
How is she?
The princess asked. Dash noted that her tone had returned to the calm, smooth, almost musical way she normally spoke. Nothing's changed. The doctor came in to look at the machines, but no pony else came by. Celestia sat down opposite Daz and stared at her sister's unmoving face.
Do you want me to leave you alone with her, or... Stay, please, Dash. I came back to speak with you, not my sister.
Me?
About what? Let me start by saying I owe you more than I could ever repay. If there is anything, ever anything I could do for you, you only need to ask.
Wow, thanks. But you already healed me, didn't you? The shadow of some of hidden thought crossed Celestia's mortal face in that teeniest of moments. Then she spoke.
It would have been wrong of me to make you suffer for helping Luna.
I was just helping out and...
Rainbow, you...
She had to stop and shake her head, clearing her thoughts.
You nearly killed yourself saving Luna. That is a sacrifice I cannot overstate. There are very few ponies who would do that for what you did for her.
The princess stopped speaking for a moment, and turned to the window behind Rainbow, where she looked out at a beautiful day.
That's what makes what I'm about to ask difficult.
What do you mean?
Rainbow Dash, I won't mince words. I would like you to replace Morningstar as Luna's bodyguard.
The princess's ancient eyes moved away from the sun, and an utter seriousness that bore the weight of untold surgeries. She added her last hooful of words. I need you to join the honor guard. Des was quiet for a long time. A very long time, in fact, especially for a young mare who usually made decisions on the fly, and knew exactly what she wanted out of life.
Never before had she really been faced with a request that caused such internal conflict. She finally came to an indecision. Why me, Princess? I don't know the first thing about being a guard's pony. You saw through the assassin, when she fooled all the ponies to our rainbow. You were willing to give up your life to protect my sister. I don't think I should, Princess. Celestia looked down. When her visage rose, it was that of an entirely different pony. Not merely tired, but ragged and weathered as well. Rainbow Dash, how old do you think I am? It was a question that Rainbow never really considered, or given any thought to. 2,000? Celestia shook her head, looking more tired than ever. 40 times that, Rainbow, and then some. And, despite what all the little fillies in Colt think, it isn't all fun and games. For 80,000 years, Luna's been my only real friend. With every pony else, I blink and they're simply gone. 80 years might seem like forever to you, Rainbow Dash. A lifetime for a lucky pony, but for me, it's barely more than a drop of water in the bucket. Rainbow didn't know what to say. She had nothing to say. No experience could compare to that. Celestia looked back at her, pleading and desperate. That's why I need you to protect her, Rainbow. She's my only companion, the only one I could count on to be there. If I lost her... For Dash, the worst part was that she didn't cry. Her face instead went back to looking the way it always did when she made public appearances. Like a mask. Hollow. Empty. Devoid of... anything. Why are you telling me this? So that you understand that I don't ask you to do this lightly. I don't trust any pony else with this, Rainbow Dash. Not Twilight, not Shining Armor, not even... She closed her eyes for a second, and Rainbow did notice a little bit of moisture, even if nothing came of it. Princess, it was just luck. I'm not a detective. I'm not a guard's pony. If you were, I wouldn't want you, Celestia answered. Rainbow, yesterday Luna told me about when you talked to her. You believed in her. You saw past the nightmare. Even Morningstar didn't give her that. I don't want some pony to just protect her from assassins and monsters. I want some pony who cares about her, who'll trust her and forgive her. Be loyal to her. You're the only pony I can trust to do that. The blank face stared for a long moment before it finally drew out the last hoofful of words. Is there anything I can do to convince you, Rainbow? The desperation in Celestia's eyes pushed her over the edge. She nodded slowly. If you really need me, then yes. When this is over and everything settles out again, you find some pony else. Until then, I do it. Celestia smiled. Suzy didn't understand. It was easy enough for the ancient mare to read Rainbow's face and know that she wasn't ready to explain. Maybe she never would be. It didn't matter. Thank you, Rainbow Dash. You're welcome, Princess. Celestia smiled widely. Honestly and warmly, rather than that little thing she put on for show. As Rainbow watched her without her usual glow and ethereal mane, it became clear just how often she put on her hollow mask. The smiles he had been using all those times simply did not compare. Rainbow felt invigorated, renewed, and above all else, rewarded. If you're hungry, I'll have the palace chefs prepare you anything you like. You're welcome to my chambers again for the night as well, and if there's anything else... Can I get a ride back to Ponyville? Rainbow wandered aloud. Just for a day or two? Celestia shook her head slowly. Luna needs you, Rainbow Dash, and the other guards are too busy to pull a chariot. But if you want to talk to your friends, we do have other ways. Like what? Celestia smiled knowingly this time. I'll be back in a few moments. She then stood up, cast one more look over Luna's sleeping form. And this time, she didn't seem nearly so sad. Stand tall, Rainbow Dash. You're my hero today. You helped me more than you can ever know. The doors would be firmly swung into the passage only moments later, leaving Rainbow Dash alone with the glasses. She waited for a long time, then turned back to the sleeping princess. Did you hear that, princess? Guess I'm your new bodyguard. That's good, right? Sounds better than fastest flyer in Equestria when I'm introducing myself. Hey, Wonderbolts! Name's Rainbow Dash, Princess Luna's bodyguard. Dash smiled a little. There was something outside her job. Yeah, definitely cool. It wasn't long after that the door swung open again, and Celestia entered. The golden horn carried an ink well, a foil, and a piece of parchment. I'm sure you know how this works by now, Rainbow.
Rainbow smiled and nodded. Dear friends, I guess I was hurt really bad, so Princess Celestia told me to tell you a moment. I guess she used some healing magic on me or something. I should learn that, for next time I break my wing or something. Anyway, I'm not going to be coming back to Ponyville for a little while. There's some issues up here that I'm helping with, and I'm kind of not supposed to talk to them. Here's something I am about to tell you though. Princess Luna's new bodyguard. I get the cool armor and everything. I know it means that I won't be back for a while, but Celestia promised that I only had to stay until things were sorted out. In the meantime, I'll be sure to write so we can keep in touch. Fluttershy, if you could take care of Tank, that would be great. Oh, and I guess I can't manage the weather anymore. So if someone you could talk by Town Hall, it'd be awesome. I know this isn't the best friendship report ever, but honestly, today's been mostly a work one. I only woke up a couple of hours ago, so I guess I'll stay on Lucky Bones. You're the best friends ever. I'm looking forward to getting everything fixed up here so I can come back to Ponyville. Until then, I'll keep in touch this way. Princess Luna's bodyguard. Go do it.